This video is sponsored by Raycon. Warhammer 40k has a rich, illustrious history of miniatures. Some of those minis getting refreshed once, twice, 3, 4 times. And I always think to myself, when I look at the old school models, how far am I willing to go back? How old is too old? And I was thinking this thought recently when a friend of mine gave me some models that for some reason he had no use for, and that is a little squad of Ogryn. These are not the new plastic Ogryns. They're not even the old Ogryns, which I actually think look really good. They might look better than the new Ogryn. No, these are the old Ogryn. And they look, well, they certainly have a look to them. And I kind of don't hate it. I think they look kind of cool. And I want to uncover what these guys can really look like. And that is going to involve a lot of work. These old minis have seen some winners, but you know what? I appreciate that they were painted. It gives these models some history. These lumpy pieces of lead are certainly classic old school, and they really do have a charm. I snapped these suckers off the bases, and I didn't have to worry about snapping ankles with these guys. Also, it looks like they were stuck down with hot glue. Honestly, not the worst idea with heavy metal models. These bases have gotta go. I dumped all these into my mesh liner for my ultrasonic cleaner to get them ready for some serious paint stripping. Now, I'm not really one to strip models. I really don't like doing it, and you almost never have to. I buy a lot of secondhand minis, I buy a lot of eBay minis, and even if the paint is a little bit thick, you can usually paint over it and it's not gonna affect the final product very much. But sometimes, like on these Ogryns, I gotta get that paint off, and that's gonna require a little bit of time in my ultrasonic cleaner. Now, I kind of have the Rolls Royce of ultrasonic cleaners. This thing is fantastic and I use it all the time, but not often for stripping models. Mostly I use it for cleaning resin and metal models. A little bit of LA is totally awesome, a little bit of tap water, a little bubbling and agitation, and it gets whatever is on there off and ready for painting. Now, when I need to use it for paint stripping, I don't use the nice clean bottle of LA is totally awesome. I use this horrible jug of disgusting paint water and LA is totally awesome. And for anybody out there who does want to strip models, I would not suggest getting a big, beautiful, nice one, because honestly, even I probably don't use this enough to warrant this excess. I bought this little glasses cleaner a couple of years ago, and this was like 20 bucks. And this honestly works great and will fit almost any model, but as long as I have it, I'm gonna use it. This towering piece of laboratory equipment not only blasts the minis with ultrasonic jiggles, but it also heats the bath, which helps the paint come off the minis. It's a good sign that once I dunked my minis and turned it on, a wave of dust floated to the surface. After 15 minutes, I took out my minis and gave them some wipes of an old toothbrush. A lot of the paint came off, but I was getting a little worried. It peeled off in sheets from the raised areas, but it didn't seem to budge much in the recesses. I gave it another 15 minutes in the ultrasonic cleaner and another round of scrubbing, but some of the paint just did not want to let go, so I decided to go for the nuclear option. I took a glass mason jar and filled it with a splash of acetone. Acetone will melt the paint off, and I was right. After a bath of this stuff, I got off almost 100% of the paint, scraping it out of their finer details. Not my preferred method, this stuff is toxic and flammable, definitely not safe to put in the ultrasonic cleaner, but it did a good job in the end. Holy cow, I remember why I don't like to strip models. It takes a lot of time and a lot of elbow grease and real grease to get off 99% of the paint. Oh, it's frustrating. 60% of the paint, it just flies right off. Then a little brushing and a little scraping, you get off 80%, 90%. You use chemicals to try to get the paint off. And then that last 1% of paint that will never come off until the heat death of the universe just laughs at you. At least I had some podcasts to keep me company. The holidays are coming up, you're scrambling to find the perfect gift. Why stop and wonder when the ultimate gift is right within earshot? Raycon's earbuds are the affordable everyday option that's perfect for listening to your favorite music, audiobooks, and everything in between on the go and at home. Their excellent ergonomic design means that they are lightweight and comfortable in your ears all day. And speaking of all day, with a 32-hour long-lasting charge, an evening or day of painting flies by no matter how long it takes. With active noise cancellation, I can focus in while letting the soothing sounds of Oingo Boingo and They Might Be Giants play on and on. These are my go-to earbuds of choice, and not only that, they have cool case covers that fit perfectly with a variety of colors Raycon earbuds come in. I went with the Dreamy Clouds cover for my blush violet earbuds. I love mine, and I love that I can leave my Raycons in their case for fast charging. That'll get me listening to Warhammer audiobooks after a long, hard day of painting in no time. And the holidays means it's time to save big for Black Friday. Go to buyraycon.com/EonsOfBattle to get 30% off site-wide. That's right, you can get up to 30% off everything on Raycon's website when you go to buyraycon.com/EonsOfBattle. Head there today and get that perfect holiday gift for that someone special. Or yourself. All right, now that I got these old school models all stripped of paint, the details are actually pretty good. I've got these guys as close to new as I'm gonna get them, so it's time to build them. Building metal models is another good reason to get them back to bare metal. These old models do not like to be glued. They bend and snap with ease, so I need to really make sure my glue bonds are as strong as possible. I use my Dremel tool to clean and flatten the feet, nail files to clean up mold lines and crunchy imperfections, and I did my best to drill the gun barrels. It's fun to get to use my metal punch tool again, and I probably finished off these drill bits by drilling them into the metal. Now that I have the models as good as new, I lathered up some JB Quick Weld 6-minute epoxy. I have used a lot of epoxies and they all stink for model making except this stuff. It really does set in 6 minutes, and it dries slightly rubbery, so even if these get dropped, that little bit of give will keep them together. Now for some basing, and I want to do something extravagant, but also simple. I glued down some 1/2-inch cork to half the bases and some 1/4-inch cork to the rest, and carved them up on an angle to get them looking unique. I'm setting these Ogryn wandering through a ruined city, and to make that little bit of still standing walls, I use some 1/4-inch cork, cutting one edge flat so that I can glue them down, making sure to leave enough room for my chonky ogres. I superglued down the ogres with lots of superglue, and this isn't a strong enough bond yet. I sprinkled on some sand and scale bricks and then dripped ultra thin superglue over top to lock these into place. The superglue soaks into the cork and cures around the sand and decorations, making an ultra hard surface that'll help hold down my metal Shreks. And it also dries in seconds, so in no time I had some really chonky bases for my really chonky boys. Now after hours of fixing, I get to black prime and zenithal these suckers and get to see what they really look like for the first time ever. Honestly, I think they look really good. Ogryn are my kind of unit. I love big, chonky fellas. Tyrant Guard, Terminators, Ogryn, big ol' toughness 6, 3 wounds with a 6-up feel no pain, so they will be a little bit tankier. And they're not bad at all. With their Ripper guns having rapid fire 3, they get 18 shots of strength 5, AP -2, damage 2. That is not bad at all. However, I'm not gonna be taking them in my armies because I don't have an Imperial Guard army. I do have a Genestealer Cult army and I can take Imperial Guard units, but Games Workshop said no. I specifically cannot have Ogryn keyword units in my army, so I am going to be re-gifting these models to Sean. Hopefully, this will make his army list a little bit more interesting and prevent him from taking a 5th Leman Russ. For these Ogryns, I think it'll be fun to use speed paint and contrast paint. When these models first came out, speed paint was decades away, and I want to see what they do for these antiques. I used gray for the guns, which did a good job of giving a little bit of color while letting the zenithal shine through for value. And now I've started the guns, I kind of want to finish them. They're my favorite part. I made up a warm gray color and did some dry brushing, then grabbed a piece of sponge and squished on a lighter gray for some texture. I don't imagine the Ogryns take much care of their weapons. Now for just a dry brushing a light gray to bring out the edges. And for a little bit of fun and saturated color, a few drippies of orange rust, really thinned down so it flows into the cracks. I got out my nicest paintbrush and did some micro scratches and the guns were looking good. Now to make everything look like this. Next up, the bullets. I picked Brownish Decay, which the bottle already looks like it's starting to decay. This is a yellowish ugly color that's just the thing. After base coating all the bullets and bandoliers, I used some yellow tan paint to highlight these, making a lot of vertical lines, like the shiny brass is reflecting light. I did a final highlight of yellow and I had another chunk of these guys all done. Now for the clothing and boots. Although white tank tops would be funny, I think black would show off their ogre flesh better. This one color did a great job on the clothing, and for the pants, a nice brown. I'm not super worried about their shirts and pants looking amazing with careful highlights. The exciting stuff on these minis is the skin and guns. I've got these Ogryn about 50% done, and I like how they're looking. They're very dark, which I actually really like, because I was a little worried that they would look like silly army Shreks, but I want them to look like, well, I want them to look like silly army Shreks, but silly army Shreks that are in the Warhammer 40,000 grimdark universe, and they're actually very competent soldiers, so having them be so dark helps them look cool. Now it's time for the skin, and I actually want the skin to be the focal point of these guys, so I gotta brighten it up. The thing about speed paint is it's transparent, so it shows what color is underneath. With weapons, armor, and clothing, it's fine to see the black and white from the zenithal, but for skin, I want to see some warmth and color, so I need to undercoat that in preparation for the speed paint. I took a red beige color and slobbered this all over the skin. This was a little tedious, and I had to make sure not to get this paint on the parts I've already finished, but this is an undercoat, so I don't have to get a perfect finish, just pink everywhere and it'll be fine. Now for the speed paint. I'm using warrior skin. This will tint the skin reddish and make the recesses of the muscles nice and dark. Now for some highlights. I took my original red beige color and painted the top of each muscle, and then mixed in some light pink, painting this in smaller and smaller dots on each muscle, making them brighter and brighter. After that, I switched to a lighter tan and kept going, applying less and less paint. A few of these guys have some stubble on their chins and heads. For half of these guys, I glazed gray and the other half brown, using null oil wash to bring out a little bit more detail. Now I've got the big stuff done, it's time for the odds and ends, like the grenades, bracelets, gloves, decorations, and robo eyes that make each of these guys special. This guy has a band-aid on his boo-boo. Once the very orky teeth were knocked out, they were getting really close. I really like the Ogryn, but I feel like in the world of Warhammer 40k and the incredibly intolerant Imperium, they don't make a lot of sense. They sure do look like mutants to me. They were kind of grandfathered in because they're older than the Imperium of Mankind. They were discovered during the Great Crusade as the descendants of human pioneers out into space, so they kind of get a free pass, but they're not mutants, they are abhumans. Which sounds even worse to say, but according to the Imperium, they're A-okay. Now I've got these guys painted up as proper Astra Militarum Ogryns, it's time to work Sean's color scheme into these guys. And for that, I'm thinking the armor. I started out with a speed paint of Beowulf Blue, which is the color Sean uses for his Cadians and Kriegers. This looks a little odd on these guys. Bright blue is not a normal armor color. I made up a blue that matches the speed paint and did some highlighting, but it still wasn't looking military-y enough. You know what I bet would fix it? Turning it into camo. Remember the blue tiger camo from Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2? That's my inspiration. I took a light blue and scribbled on some patches, filling up about a third of each armor panel, and then did the same thing with white paint. This definitely helped them look more military-y, and the dusting of gray and white paint with a dry brush made them look a lot more worn out and damaged. To further beat up the armor, I sponged on some light gray. This helped a lot on the smaller armor bits that would look a little bit too busy in camo. But you know what looks great in camo? That's right, our website. EonsOfBattle.com is the place to find our merch and the best way to support us doing what we do with a membership. Each month, members get a credit they can use on our new monthly terrain pack or any previous pack we have ever made. For the month of November, EonsOfBattle.com is getting chaotic with the Desecrated Engine, a war machine that could loosely be called a tank, but such an ordinary word does not properly describe the power of this demonic machine. With grasping chainsaw-tipped claws and a tummy blaster that won't quit, this unstoppable engine of chaotic might can roar its way through a battlefield. This insect-like monstrosity comes fully loaded with armor and weapon options so that it is ready to rumble with any army that dares to face it. I picked out all the Imperialises with white paint, and Sean's scheme is a blue army on a winter battlefield, so these Shreks need some snow. I started off dry brushing the base with a light gray to bring out the details in the sand and cork, and then made up some snow. My favorite snow is Army Painter Battlefield Snow. I mixed this with matte medium, which makes for a gloopy slush that I can spread onto the base and it stays right where I put it. While the snow was drying, I hit the edge of the bases with black paint, and these old models are back and better than ever. The old school Ogryn are done, and you know what? I think they look really good. I don't think they would look out of place on the modern tabletops of Warhammer 40k 10th edition. They're old and they're kind of small, but they're pretty chonky. They fill up these 40mm bases really nicely. What I really like about these guys is they all have a little something unique about them. They all have the exact same body essentially, and they all have the exact same gun, but every single guy is a little different. There's bandolier guy, there's bayonet guy, there's shoulder armor guy, there's chain wrapped around the fist guy, and they all have these little things that make them unique, but together in a group, they are unmistakably Ogryn. And I feel like that's a little bit lost on the new plastic ones. Even though the poses are much better and the proportions are much better and they look really good, they all have shoulder armor on the right side. They all have the exact same pants, they all have the exact same shirt, they all have the exact same gun down to the rivets. I think a little bit of that chaos does make them feel a lot more real and a lot more alive. Let me know in the comments below if you guys think these old models hold up or if I am super duper reaching. I gotta go give these guys to Sean so that we can get a game in and I can make my Terminators fight some Ogryn. That sounds like a really fun fight.